the definition, the first problem I had with this was tactical, right? Because it's a word that we all use regularly, but who knows what it actually means. I know what tactical is in military terms, and I know what strategic is in military terms, but I looked it up and it says showing adroit planning aiming at an end beyond the immediate action, and I still wasn't sure what it means. So I've basically disregarded the title to some extent. We've had a lot of wonderful stuff on science, and science is the answer to everything basically, but there is also obviously a point where people have to catch the fish in the first place, and this is what I'm dealing with. There's a little bit of science in there, but mostly it's about fishing. Some of this you'll all know anyway, but I'm going to start with the basics. The pike is a teleost fish, and therefore in evolutionary terms less advanced than amphibians, reptiles and mammals. Despite this, having evolved for 200 million years, it is without doubt a highly successful species. It has survived longer than the dinosaurs. That success has been based on instinct and a limited ability to learn. We as anglers do not fully understand the extent of that ability to learn, but a pike certainly knows where it is. It knows by instinct and its physiology when to breed, and the endocrine and nervous systems dictate whether or not a pike is hungry or not. If a pike is hungry, its instinctive behaviour and form enables it to satiate that hunger. A complex biological machine, yes, but one we as anglers should have little difficulty in understanding. Unfortunately, we live in air while a pike lives in water. We are more or less excluded from that watery world without the benefit of complex diving equipment. And I doubt if a pike is all that bothered what is going on in the outside world itself. In order to catch pike using rod and line angling, we have to try and understand pike behaviour. As I've already implied, direct observation of pike is rare. Why is this? Young juvenile pike of 5 to 10 centimetres can frequently be found in weed cover and can be watched quite easily. As soon as pike get to certain sizes, most move out to open water habitats, where they remain invisible to us. Even 3 metres of otherwise clear-looking water is not clear enough to see the bottom in most waters. So we are fishing blind. Adding to our problems, pike are not evenly distributed through a watercourse. There will be a few areas where there are lots of pike and a lot of areas where there are no pike. Before I explain how pike anglers approach the problem of finding the pike themselves, I need to demonstrate one fact. Some of the very best pike anglers in the UK do not have university degrees, are not nuclear physicists, and certainly did not have any part in the discovery of the structure of DNA. They have a basic understanding of pike behaviour, do not try to complicate things, and for all intents and purposes do the obvious things when they fish. Now, this slide, which you've seen already today, which isn't my fault, is the thing that we all pray for, which is a pike of over 20 kilos. Now, where's my hand clicker? The first issue we have to consider is where to find the pike. Now, this is fairly straightforward, you think. Well, because pike live in so many varied environments, it's not an easy question to answer. Pike can live in glacial lakes of 100 metres average depth or lowland lakes of only 2 metres. Pike can live in most types of river, only being excluded from the trout and grayling zones. They can exist in saline water, such as that found in parts of the Baltic. Generally, in glacial lakes, you can say that beyond 20 metres, you are unlikely to find pike. Between 2 and 20 metres, pike can be found. In some waters, 12 metres is about the limit. The more structure there is in a lake, usually the easier it is to find pike. And this is just a very simple diagram of the idealised glacial lake where you would find most likely to find the pike. the more structure is in a lake, usually the easier it is to find pike. Structure can range from natural features such as submerged islands to extensive weed beds growing out of 4 metres of water. There are also man-made structures on many lakes and reservoirs. These include what we call reservoir drawdown towers, aerators, bridges, harbours and so on. Smaller and shallower waters can have interesting structures such as marinas on canals, and on some rivers areas have been constructed as nature reserves. Shallow waters can have extensive areas of waterweed, marginal plants in particular. A canal with extensive marginal plants, such as reeds, can be more attractive to pike than those parts without it. In the UK, winter food fish shoals take up residence in built-up areas. The presence of humans deter predators such as cormorants, and there is one thing that fishers are terrified of, and that is cormorants. This is my demonstration of a cormorant, by the way. Right? Seasonal behaviour. Just another picture of where we locate pike on a glacial lake. This has been used again, but it's not my fault again. This is my picture, actually. Seasonal behaviour. Pike do display seasonal movements. If we are unaware of these movements, we may frequently end up fishing where there are no pike. That's simple. The most obvious movement by pike is to the spawning grounds. The need for submerged grass or aquatic weed in shallow water means that pike have in some waters to move considerable distances to find these areas. On Loch Lomond, for example, at the northern end, this is a place called Ardluey, there is only one suitable spawning area in about 10 kilometres of loch. Needless to say, the same fish return to these areas each year. On Loch Corrib, which is this, where intensive efforts have been carried out to remove pike using gill nets set in shallow bays. This is one of the bays. Using gill nets, some pike, perhaps by luck, end up spawning away from these areas, in amongst sunken trees and bushes. And it'd be nice to think that that behaviour is repeated every year. Once lucky, twice lucky, 3 times lucky. We don't know whether that's true or not, but it'd be nice to assume that's how some of these fish survive. We as anglers, while not seeking to catch spawning pike, can time our efforts so that we intercept the pike before and after they have spawned in a closely defined area. Movement to spawning areas by pike from pre-spawning feeding areas can occur very quickly. Conor Beaver and Veludin found that pike of 33 to 66 centimetres could maintain station in a flume at up to 20 centimetres per second. Now, this would be unsustainable for any length of time, but even half that speed could see a pike move at 2.78 kilometres per hour. In other words, a steady walking pace for a human, and indicative of how pike can be in one place one day and a long way away the next. I did look for some better figures on the rate of pike movement, but seems as I'm not at a university and I have only the internet to rely on these days, it's not as easy as it used to be. Pike can also move long distances to exploit food resources. As anglers, we need to be aware of this, or once again we'll be fishing for non-existent pike. On Loch Mask in Ireland, until the pike removal took serious effect, pike would regularly move from the main loch, which is 10,000 hectares, to a small loch of 2 hectares, a journey of 5 kilometres. The small loch is a transit area through which brown trout run to reach their spawning grounds. Obviously, they also use the same route to return post-spawn. The pike instinctively, probably reinforced over thousands of years, intercept the trout in the confines of this small water. Once again, exploiting this situation can lead to some good catches of pike. I don't want to boast, but my best week included 7 fish over 9 kilos. Whoops. Right. Food availability is so often the key with pike location. On large glacial lakes, food fish gravitate towards deeper water during the winter. These deeper areas will frequently be relatively sheltered. A large deep bay of 50 hectares, for example. When food fish such as pike and bream gather in overwintering areas, pike eventually find them and can take up residence adjacent to them. The presence of food fish is most easily spotted on a calm day when roach and bream carry out their dawn display by rolling or jumping on the surface. Incidentally, no one seems to know why they do this. Interestingly, despite all the fish that will be in a bay, they are hard to pick up on sonar until they are more than 10 metres deep. There are quite a few other seasonal movements of pike to be found throughout the world, and these include interceptions of whitefish runs on waters such as Great Slave Lake in Canada. On UK rivers, lamprey runs are intercepted in the winter in whirlpools, where the upstream movement prevents the lampreys from moving upstream. In fact, anything which moves from A to B, including eels, salmon and sea trout, smolts and adults, will be susceptible to interception. We need to have that resized, but I don't think we're going to get it resized, so never mind. Are there any big pike in there? That's the next question. Though there are plenty of pike anglers who consider a 5 kilo fish a big one, most serious pike anglers, this is in the UK, aspire to catching a 10 or even a 15 kilo fish. To catch such a fish, you first have to find a water where they are present. Fairly obvious. Most fisheries will produce pike of 10 kilo and a few are capable of producing pike of 15 kilo. Let's look at what is required to produce what we call a specimen pike. 1. An ample supply of food fish. 2. A high standard of angling so that catch and release is practiced without mortality. No commercial fishing, that's the third one. 4. No pike removal in the name of protecting other species. And 5th, last but not least, and probably as important as the other 4, good water quality. In the UK, the very best pike fishery is this. This is a very big pike. That's all you need to know. Steve's already shown some other ones from Chew Valley. The very best pike fishery is Chew Valley Lake. This 600-hectare reservoir is stocked heavily with rainbow and brown trout. Initial attempts to remove the pike in the UK, the fact is that trout anglers don't like pike eating trout, eventually gave way to an acceptance that a large amount of money could be made from selling tickets to fish for the pike. It is estimated that the pike fishing at Chew generates around £100,000 sterling a year, which should be more than enough to compensate for the trout the pike eat. How big then are the pike? Well, the biggest so far has been 19.5 kilos. Over 60 pike over 15.9 kilos. This is the problem with converting kilos from pounds, is that you get decimal points. And the number of 14 kilo pike, everybody's given up counting. It's just too many. This is exceptional pike fishing, and pike fishing dates are always taken up in 2 days. They're all gone. The standard of pike handling is quite good, and because of this there are repeat captures of big pike. On other waters there have been examples of pike which have been captured over 10 times, which shows that the correct handling of pike means that they will survive being caught several times. Now, it's useful to use science to help us find big pike. Very little in the way of age determination has been carried out on the larger pike caught in the UK. Craig makes it clear that age determination of pike becomes difficult using scales when the subject is slow growing. The opercular bone has long been a preferred method of age determination, but more recently the clephrum, which most of you will be very familiar with that, has been found to be easier to read. Unfortunately, both the opercular bone and the clephrum require the sacrifice of the pike, and this would be intolerable in the UK. Generally, from my own experience of scale reading, it has been possible, give or take a year, to say that a fast-growing pike of 96 centimetres, weighing 10 kilos, can be 6 years of age. A 14-kilo pike of 106 centimetres would be 8 years old. These are very fast-growing pike from fisheries that are artificially stocked with trout. Examples of slow-growing pike I have examined may be 4 or 5 years older, and the same degree of error applies on the scale reading, but these fish will be the same length as the ones I've just mentioned from trailwaters, so they will be much older. I do have conclusive proof from the identification of pike via their markings of the growth in weight of a number of fish, and 1.8 kilo per year once the fish have reached 4.5 kilos is quite normal in heavily stocked waters. In natural waters, there is one good example of a fish I caught in 1994 at 17.5 kilos, which was recaptured in 1996 at 19 kilos, an annual increase of 0.9 kilos. That is modest. I would suggest that this is more typical growth in weight. I appreciate that true growth is a function of length, but the non-scientific pike fishing community of the UK are much more interested in weight than length. So in answer to the question, are there any big pike in there, I suggest that we all try and find waters where the pike grow at £4 per year, or 2 kilos, and live for 12 years. It is essential to adapt fishing methods to suit the seasonal movement of pike. There is a belief amongst many pike anglers that you should match the hatch, i.e. present the pike with the bait which the pike are feeding on. My own experience is that because pike are opportunist feeders, they may take any bait presented to them. For example, brown trout should be good baits for pike which are feeding on brown trout. Yes, you will catch on brown trout, but I've caught much better on mackerel. Where lamprey are running up a river, there definitely is a positive correlation between lamprey being a superior bait and lamprey being numerous in the river. Interestingly, many other species also exploit the lamprey, and these include zander, chub and even barbel. When the lamprey are not in the river, it is not as good a bait. The use of static dead baits to catch pike is a relatively modern development from the 1950s. Prior to then, pike anglers were to some extent brainwashed into thinking that a live fish or a lure representing a live fish was the only way to catch pike. We now know better, and dead baits fish static on the bottom catch as many pike in the UK as any other method. Though plenty of our large mammalian and bird predators are scavengers, it has taken a long time for pike anglers to accept that pike are highly efficient scavengers. Shoals of roach and bream often contain unfit members, and if one of them should happen to die, as must happen every day, then the pike instinctively knows that it should pick the prey item up. I doubt if pike understand the concept of gaining the maximum return in energetic terms from an easy meal, but as an evolutionary tactic, it has obviously done the pike no harm at all. How pike locate a nondescript dead fish sitting on the bottom of a lake is the subject of some conjecture among pike anglers. My view is that the smell has to be the key sense used to locate a dead fish. Once a fish is dead, the integrity of the cell membranes start to break down, and this must mean that various water-soluble amino acids and proteins leak from the bait. Many fish species are sensitive to small amounts of such substances in water, and I've no doubt pike can locate a dead fish by smell alone, even in coloured water. Sight will presumably have a part as well, where the dead fish is clearly visible. In weedy waters, sight is probably unimportant, and smell must be the only sense involved. So far, I've referred to dead baits. Where allowed, live baits can be highly effective, and rainbow trout are very useful on waters stocked with rainbow trout. This is mainly because they are the only baits allowed. We have strict movement restrictions for freshwater fish in the UK. Live baits provide a heightened level of stimulus, and for those that have kept pike in aquaria will know that they react very quickly to live fish. A dead fish may be ignored, and this is probably because in captivity some predators require additional stimuli to provoke a feeding reaction. Armstrong found in his research that dead minnows frequently had to be twitched to elicit a feeding response in laboratory conditions. And needless to say, there'll be someone else who hasn't had that experience, but there you go. The behaviour may exist in the wild because there are waters, particularly those with high densities of prey fish, where the pike are really caught on dead baits. Lures present the biggest challenge because many of them do not remotely resemble any particular food fish. Lures are often mistaken by pike as a food source, but often pike are not really interested in them. A skillful angler can induce a feeding response from an otherwise apathetic pike by using a variety of lures and imparting different actions to them. The advantage of lures is that you can present them to more pike in the course of a day. Though a high percentage of pike might choose to ignore them, the fact that you present to more pike compensates. Where pike are spread out, lures are the best option. Where pike are concentrated, the efficiency of live and dead baits means that this may well be the best approach. I cannot be sure because I cannot see underwater, but I suspect that on a good day, I catch most of the pike in a limited area using live or dead baits. An indication of the fact that this might be happening is that if I return to the same spot the next day, I really catch much. This is, of course, the beauty of pike fishing. You cannot easily see where the pike are. Much of what they do is deduction and using experience from previous trips. There may come a day when underwater cameras enable us to see the pike, or advances in sonar technology will leap forward and again you will be able to see the pike. I'm not altogether sure this is a direction I wish to take up in my pike fishing. Whichever method you use to catch pike, it is essential to take into account the seasonal nature of pike's feeding. Diana noted that the daily ration was high between May and August, peaking in June, with a spawning fast mid-April and very low in the winter. As keen pike anglers, we notice similar trends wherever we fish. In addition, there are also periods of near fasting in high summer in the UK, when pike disappear and presumably aren't feeding very much. The ovaries of a pike start to develop in October in the UK, and it is a theory of mine that the additional energy requirement requires additional feeding, and this is why on some waters October can be much better for catching pike despite the lowering of the temperature. Pike are generally said to be cold water fish, and the concept of cold-blooded animals that feed more when it gets cold is difficult to accept. Yet on some waters this appears to be what happens. We know that where temperatures exceed 21 degrees, Castleman noted a reduced rate of food consumption in shallow lakes. At temperatures of 25 C, Hedrick and Carline found that pike actually lost weight. Therefore, at higher temperatures, we should know not to bother fishing for pike in shallow water. Glacial lakes are different, where pike may be able to find cooler water. Conversely, we pike anglers know that pike are quite catchable in water temperatures of 4 C, and presumably lower than that where wind agitation prevents freezing. We do know that pike can respond favourably to temperature increases from very low temperatures, which is what you would expect from a cold-blooded animal. What is hard to understand is how they sometimes feed more when there is a sharp drop in temperature. In large bodies of water, a reduction in air temperature is probably not felt for several days. On very shallow waters, a sharp drop in temperature can actually deter pike from feeding. Yet later in the day, towards sunset, when temperatures may have risen, pike will feed actively. Obviously, in the case of shallow waters, the quick drop in temperature does reduce feeding, but in large bodies of water, the effect of temperature drops is mitigated by the volume of water. Pike anglers believe that a temperature drop can encourage pike to feed. The assumption, having no grounds in science at all, being that they sense that hard times are on the way. Finally, one other factor that has a big influence on the catchability of pike. This is water clarity. Craig and Babylak showed that the condition of pike was related to water transparency. What we think is clear water might not be for a pike. We do know that a change from clear water to heavily coloured water puts pike off the feed. Well, I say that, but interestingly, after a river's been in flood for a month and eventually returns to its normal level, the pike are never thin. They must feed in these conditions, but we cannot catch them. As it is, we pike anglers make sure that we are ready to fish as soon as the water changes from brown to a milky green or grey. The pike fishing is usually first class. Which sense pike use to detect food in coloured water is unclear, but from the poor results we have as anglers, it is clearly not one that helps us to catch them. The senses that I know a pike have are sight, sound and smell. Some fish are sensitive to electrical fields, though again with limited access to academic journals it is difficult to find out if pike have that ability. We pike have to understand pike to be able to catch them. We need to know where they are at certain times of the year. It is essential to know when they feed most, be that time of day, month or year. Finally, we need to make the best choice of the methods we have available to us. That then is why pike fishing is such an absorbing obsession. There are many different facets of pike fishing and trying to master them is probably impossible, but it is very, very nice to try. Thank you.